hey there, Marie Greene from Olive Knits here, and for today's Knitting Rescue 911, we're going to talk about what to do when this happens, when you have a bunch of stitches fall off and they're all kind of in varying degrees of disarray here. Some of them are only just barely off the needle, and some of them have dropped all the way down. Now, we have talked about how to pick up drop stitches, and if you want to find that video, you can find it right here with the rest of them. But sometimes it's more than just one dropped stitch. So how do we deal with it when it's a range of drop stitches? The most important thing is to catch as many of the stitches as you can, as quickly as you can. So we're going to start. We're going to use the tip of our right needle to just sort of capture this stitch right here. Just needs that one loop brought through. And I'm going to get these back onto this needle so that I can then move them over to the left needle. Notice that the way that I have them on is so that the legs of the stitch are here. So I'm going to slide them back to the left needle so that the legs of the stitch are facing that way. Now I have this stitch here that has dropped a ways down. Now you can do this with the tip of your knitting needle, or you can take a crochet hook and just pick up the stitches one rung at a time, grabbing it and bringing it through. And then again, just like we've done before, and I'm going to pull this out so you can see it. Here are the legs of the stitch. Do you see that? Let me really pull it out here so it's exaggerated. So the legs of the stitch look like this. When you're getting your stitches back on your needle, you want the legs of the stitches to aim that way. So the stitch goes like this. You want to aim the legs that way. By doing that, then you've been able to set up your stitches so that they are ready to knit. If you get your stitches back on your needle and you go to knit and it doesn't insert through the stitch properly, you might have it on there twisted, and that's something we will talk about in another knitting rescue video. But for this one, getting your stitches back on your needles, the most important thing is to catch them as quickly as you can, and also to make sure you're getting them on going the right direction. Now sometimes, and I'm going to just take a bold move here, sometimes you may have to pull a bunch of stitches out because maybe you are frogging something or ripping it out, right? So if you have to pull way back, then you may find that it's just faster to pull the needle out and get all of those stitches off the needle so that you can tug at that working yarn and rip back to the point where it was before the mistake or whatever period of time that you're trying to go back to. Then you'll have to get all of those stitches back on your needle. And the important thing, again, to remember is that they're all facing the right direction. So we are going to just start right here at the edge and make sure that we're getting that little, there we go, getting that first stitch. All right, so as I'm putting these stitches back on the needle, I'm taking the tip of my right needle and I'm going into the back of the stitch. And again, we want to make sure the legs of the stitch wrap around and face to the left. So we are going to just go through the back from right to left. This may actually work differently if you're left-handed. I'm not sure. Typically with knitting, it doesn't matter if you're left-handed or right-handed because you can still do all the techniques, but you may find holding your needles a little differently may work better for you. If you're coming from the left and working to the right, then you're going to go through the front legs of the stitch. If we're coming with the right needle and working right to left, we are going to go through the back of the stitch and just making sure that we are getting them all on the needle facing the same way. Now, guess what? It's not the end of the world if you get one on there twisted. You can untwist it when you get to it, but getting them on there the right direction is a big help, and it will help to avoid confusion later on when you are knitting and maybe you run into a stitch that is being a little weird and you can't figure out why. It's also good to make sure that you don't drop any of them because then that starts a whole other problem. And I'm almost there. We're just getting these picked up. Some yarn is much more slippery and might be a little bit trickier to get back on the needles. I would caution you that if you're pulling something out and the yarn is super slippery, then that's where you might want to use a lifeline, and that is a different Knitting Rescue 911 video. So look for that one if you want to learn how to use a lifeline. But when it's a wool yarn and it's got a little stickiness to it, I like to call it crunchy yarn because it's a little bit more rustic and what people might call scratchy. But that is so much easier to get back on your needles. And now look, they're all my stitches are back in place, easy breezy. And now I can continue on with my knitting without any worry. So that is how you get stitches back on your needle, whether they fall down in the center or whether you're starting at the beginning and you're putting them all back on together. Either way, get those stitches back on the needle and you're ready to keep going. If you love learning knitting tips and tricks, make sure to like and follow me here on YouTube so you'll be the first to know when new videos are available.